I love that so much. But I'm going to kind of pivot to a little bit more of like some hard skills or like kind of technical skills that we talk about. And I really would love to know if you can tell me about a technical skill that you love to teach, right? So what is something that you do, hard skill, you know, in your day-to-day life that you love to teach other people?
I'll start.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
the thing that I love to teach other people, and I'm going to consider it a hard skill because I think it's incredibly important, is interpretation.
Yes. Tell me more.
Yeah. So I am one of those opera singers that came through theater.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like I didn't grow up playing the violin. I grew up doing musical theater and dancing and doing a lot of straight plays. And the reason I went to Carnegie Mellon is because they did musical theater. We'd had 3 years of acting, we had 4 years of dance. Like it was something I wanted to continue to expand that part of my life. And I still do a lot of musical theater. I do a lot of new music and I tend to often live in that Venn diagram between opera and musical theater, that like strip in the middle where you're like, I don't know what it is.
Yep. But I love that spot.
But I like it. Yeah. I love, because I think it took a really long time when I finally was like, I'm going to be an opera singer, to really take ownership of my interpretation, like my unique spin on things the way I felt, because I felt like I had to do everything right. Like there was a right way of doing something, a right interpretation of something, and the wrong interpretation of something, which is bogus. Like that's all completely bogus. And so I don't necessarily need to agree with your interpretation of it, but I love to help give people the skills to make those kind of choices.
Great.
So that it's clear what they're saying.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite things to talk about. It's sort of like, okay, this sentence, like, what are you feeling?
Yeah.
Like something as simple as like, it's raining outside.
Mm-hmm.
It can be euphoric if you've been in a drought, or it could be devastating if you're a bride on your wedding day. And and like we who interpret other people's music are given clues, like by the music, if it's where it is in the voice, like there are other aspects of it. But we always have a choice. And I think I remember when I first saw other people making those choices on stage, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. And it can change from performance to performance to
lights you up, right? You're like, oh, you can do that.
Right. I just felt like I was given permission, and I love to show people that they have permission, tell people they have permission, and then start to give them the tools to make those kind of choices.
Yeah.
And then see where they can go.
Love it. Sharin, if somebody's listening at home right now and they're stuck, like they're kind of doing it all by themselves because it's quarantine time, like, can you give them, what would be one of those tools that you would tell them, like, start with this, like take your aria, take your art song, whatever it is that you're kind of looking at the moment. Here's this tool that I want you to apply to like kind of get into interpretation a little bit more.
Yeah. So I love, so coming from a theater background, so if you're doing a work like an aria, something there is something before it and after it, I love to see what's happening right before it. And I also think it's incredibly important what happens right after it, because it's
not just a vacuum.
It's not just a vacuum.
Yeah.
Like you can't, it has to be linear in some way. Yeah, it's like one of the pieces I've worked on with a lot of singers is I Could Have Danced All Night, because I've played Eliza Doolittle. It's one of my favorite things in musical theater. It's one of my favorite songs like kind of ever. And I think what's so important about it is that moment before, because it's this huge stretch of like the montage of them trying to teach her with the marbles and the cake and the whole thing. And then it goes into the rain in Spain. And then she does not say a word. From the end of that song, there's an entire scene that goes on where she literally, like, she does not speak until that top of that song. Yeah. And like, I think that is an incredibly important thing. They take the words out of her mouth. It's like she's rendered silent. And the fact that it takes Mrs. Pierce being like, you have to go to bed. And it's no. And it's sort of like, and I also, I've sung a lot of Baroque music too, and they're so similar. The idea of singing the same thing 3 times to get a different effect. So it's like, well, where does she end up? Where do you end up? Where are you going? And being able to sort of plot those differences. Like this, like round one, we're doing this, round two, we're doing this. Who am I and what do I want? Which sounds like such a cliche, but it's so important. It's so important. It's like, what, by saying these words, what am I trying to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
What, like, am I trying to convince somebody else of something? Am I trying to convince myself of something? Mm-hmm. You know, it's like the moment, it's one of these moments. So I'm going to get on a mild tangent. When I was in grad school, I had the incredible fortune of working with Catherine Malfitano. It was before she started on faculty at Manhattan School.
Yeah.
She took, I can't remember how many of us there were. It was like the Malfitano project, and I think there were 8 or 9 of us that she took, and we like spent weekends in her apartment.
Amazing. What?
It was incredible, and I like fangirled out. It was
What is your life?
It was wild.
What is your life?
There's like, you know, her Emmy on the TV talk that she did on her piano, and you're like, what is happening? And I remember her working on Mimi's first aria with one of the other sopranos that were there, mm-hmm. and she taught, and I'll never forget it because she went through every like drop of symbolism that's in there that Puccini knew, that Mimi would have known about, and then she's speaking Rodolfo's language because he's the poet. So he, like, everything that she's saying and how that all has meaning. And it like blew my mind. I think about it all this, like whenever I hear it, like I can't listen to that aria without like just nearly weeping, because she's very quietly telling him so much by saying very little. Mm-hmm. So I like to look at, you know, the before and after. What I like with art song or like standalone pieces is you get a lot more freedom. Mm-hmm. You get a lot more freedom. So it's you know, it's still poetry, mm-hmm. but there can still be an intention. Like, who am I saying this to and for what reason? Mm-hmm. How do I want people to be changed at the end of it? Yeah. You can be saying it to yourself. How do I want myself to be changed at the end of it? What am I trying to accomplish by saying these words?
Yeah. I love that. Well, and I think and making the discovery, right? What am I discovering as I'm saying this to myself? Yeah. Particularly if you've got the list, right? And you're like, I'm saying it this time, I'm saying it again. Did I have a discovery? Is somebody else having a discovery? You know, like, how is that changing? How is that changing us? And how is that changing the world in which we're living, like in this moment together? And yes. Sharin, you and I could go on about interpretation, you know, just for like days.
Totally.
So, Ryan, do you have a technique or like a technical skill that you love to teach?
I would preface this with the fact that I'm a tenor.
I can't wait to see where this goes.
I have a feeling that's where this is starting.
And I have been singing since I was 3 years old. So I've always, for some reason, been pushed that direction and encouraged that direction. I always had excellent teachers and cheerleaders and people behind me supporting me. I think that's something that's important that we all need to do, is to support the talent when it needs to be and can be. I am a firm believer, and I shouldn't say believer. I will never forget when one of my teachers told me that God only gives you so many high notes, don't waste them in the practice room. And I know a lot of, and it comes with insecurity with some people. It comes with the fact that, you know, work equals a result, and that by pounding your voice into submission like a piece of metal is going to suddenly make a high note appear. I'm more of a holistic approach to that of you have to find out what fits for your voice. Mm-hmm. I was not I did not have a consistent high C. I could, and I did, and every once in a while I had a D flat, you know, when needed, but I hated it. And so, and I didn't want to live up there. I mean, you didn't like singing super high stuff. I mean, you can. Yeah. And so I think there's also a point where, as I've heard Sharin tell students as well, is that you need to find out what you like, and you need to do it well. Mm-hmm. Don't try to put yourself into it just because Pavarotti made so much money and he has an album called King of the High Seas, or whatever it is, doesn't mean that you need to always have the high C. Larry Brownlee's doing fine. Right. You know, Brian Eno is great, and they can have all of those highs. I don't want them. You know, I never did. So, but you can also like make a great career, you know, with with, you know, B flats and B naturals, and or finding that middle ground of where you need to sing. I know a lot of singers that have very limited range, but make up for it in their heart and their acting. And you would never know. You would never, until you actually thought about it, you went and you looked through their repertoire, you go, huh, that person only has like you know, an octave and a half. Who knew?
Right.
You know?
Or they only have to do an octave and a half on stage. Like they're just like,
You know,
they might have it and they're like, yeah, nah.
Yeah, so there, I have a firm belief of not overdoing it, you know, and in the practice room, I think that, you know, but I mean, everybody needs to do their own practice. I'm not telling, this is not an excuse not to practice, whoever you think you are. You have to
I
practice.
feel like you're looking at me, Ryan.
But that's one of the reasons that I did not transition into teaching, because I never considered myself a great student. And that's also one of the reasons that I transitioned out, because I was not giving the music its due. And I could see myself a slippery slope ahead to where I wasn't practicing enough, where I wasn't, you know, I wasn't continuing to learn on my own, and knowing the fact that I wasn't going to, and I wasn't willing to put that effort into, meant for me it was time to stop, because we've seen a few singers out there who should have stopped a while back, and instead they're just, you know, writing on their own history, you know, like their own reputation, and you know, where some people be like, oh, they should really stop. You know, and I didn't want to get there. I mean, that I saw that could have been me 20 years from now, and so I just stopped that. It's, again, it goes back to being hungry and being that hustle that we talked about earlier. That you do need that. You need to have that killer instinct and the desire to work that hard, knowing that it will pay off. I mean, somebody told me a long time ago as well, that being a singer, and I do believe this is true, is kind of like being a comic in New York. You stand in line for a long time, and you stand in line and you stand in line. Eventually, you're going to get your opportunity. You darn well better be ready when that time comes. We can talk about probably an hour on people getting their chance to, you know, be an understudy, and when that chance comes along, it can make them into a star, or it can burn them for the rest of their career.
Right.
But the other word that somebody said is that if you step out of that line, you got to go to the back of the line if you want to get back in. Right. And I think that it's that constant work there. It's the hustle of wanting to stay in there. So I mean, I kind of transitioned from practicing to whatever, but I was not a big warmer upper.
No, it's the most infuriating thing in the world. Like, I'm ready, and I'm like, I've seen these Soprano.
But that different bodies are different, you know. And I think that as long as you know where, that could bring me up to something else, is that I do think that, let's say it's performance day, I'm a believer of, don't completely change your style, because you like don't like all of a sudden I'm going to drink all this hot water, all of a sudden I'm going to not eat breakfast, all of a sudden I'm going to not have that cheeseburger because cheese is bad for my voice. If you're singing and you had a cheeseburger and then you went to the practice room every other day, why do you need to change it? Because your body's going to go, you know, when you start change, and this is not science, guys. I'm not a doctor, but I believe that your body starts going, what the hell's wrong? He's drinking a lot of water right now. Oh my gosh. Well, why didn't he eat breakfast? Oh my gosh. Well, I better start reacting. And then your body starts doing different things, and then you also not singing in a way that you're used to. So then you get on stage and you're like, why does my voice feel the same? Well, you know,
you're doing something different, right?
Yeah,
you changed your instrument.
So I don't know. I mean,
you said something that I wanted to pick up on in there, which I would love for both of you to kind of talk about, which I kind of think of this as identifying your lane, right? If people are like, stay in your lane, right? that when if you know, maybe we don't always know right away that, you know, I can be a tenor that's not popping out high C's as the bread and butter of my game, but that kind of talking to that moment where you're like, how do you know this is the thing? What can I hang my hat on as a person? Like what was a feeling? What was something that you heard? Like, like, I think that it's so important, and I hear this from a lot of singers, I hear this from a lot of clients, where they're so used to fitting into molds that they have a really hard time identifying what their thing is when it comes time for them to show it off, or when it comes time for them to know this is the thing that I need to bring to the front, right?
You want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So he touched on this briefly, and it was something that Ryan MacPherson said when I think it was my first summer at drama class.
Yeah.
The advice he gave to the young artists were find out what you love to do and then get really, really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seems like so simple, right? But
Right.
But he said it, and I was like, oh damn, because I think we're all fed a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel very strongly about this, that we all, especially like the yap route where you're like, you have to have one of each aria and it has to represent all these different styles and blah, blah, blah. Like you have to show that you're proficient in all the things that we're supposed to be proficient in. Like you have to be able to sing in a couple of languages. You have to be, you know what I mean? Like show that you have a grasp of different styles.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much repertoire out there. There's so many, like we don't all have to have the same 10 arias in our binder that we're
right.
There's so much out there. And it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of self-assuredness to be like, this is what I do, this is what I love to do, and this is what I'm good at. There are certain things that people do a hell of a lot better than I do vocally. And I'm like, that is incredible. I will continue to work towards it. Like, it's not an excuse to like not work on something.
Of course. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like not an excuse to be like, well, I just don't do that. Like,
right,
no.
Right.
Like trying to improve certain aspects will improve everything. Mm-hmm. So it's like, there are just certain things that like, I know I do well and I love doing. So it's like, as I said earlier, I love doing musical theater. I love doing like that old school, like real legit musical theater. I love singing new music. I live in that in-between world. I've done a lot of pieces like that live in that, that in-between, like one might call it operetta now. I've done I love singing early music because my voice likes to run. So I do a lot of bel canto music because my voice likes to run.
Yeah.
Like it likes to run fast.
Yeah.
And I love singing music like that.
Yes.
So something I struggle with is singing like beautiful, long lyric lines. It's something that I've always struggled with. Like I self-identify as a soubrette because it's my personality. Those are my skills. Like, you know, that's just everything that falls into that box is like what my skill set is. And it's like, I will sometimes listen to my friends sing something like Depuis le jour. And I'm just like, it is incredible. Like, I want to be able to do that. And I work on it and I work on it and I work on it. But I know it's.
Well, there's the teachers or people that have said, why?
Well, yeah. The greatest conversation with my manager ever was I sang, I prepared like I was like, I'm working on all this rep and I sang for her and she was just like, I mean, like, yeah, but why?
But why? Yeah. But
like, it was just, she was like, you're so good at all of these things.
Yeah. Right.
And you love doing all of these things.
Yeah. Well, and it's so clear watching you on stage, Sharin, you know, is watching you light up when you're doing those things that you love. You do so much of it so incredibly well. I mean, it's just nuts. But like at the same time, when you're doing those things that you love, it just like spills out all over. It's like, it's just exactly who you are. And so I think that's part of it too, is just like, what's that feeling? Can you feel it when you're doing the thing that you love? Can you feel that it's lighting you up? Can you feel that it's like spilling out of you and you're like, oh, I just gotta do this.
100%. And that's what the audience wants.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And what the audition panel wants. So it's not like, oh, she doesn't sing Pamina, why not? It's sort of like, no, like that is like.
And if they do, you don't want to work for it.
Right. But it's like, but it's like hearing someone do an incredible, I don't know, Una voce poco fa, that is like, you know, fireworks and champagne.
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, you see them connecting to it. You see them like loving what they're doing,
Making
and they're confident in
decisions.
it, and they're making decisions. And you're like, yes, more of that.
Yeah.
I can work with that. Like being excited about what you're doing and like having that love behind it translates completely. Like you can tell as audience members, like forget the audition panel, like you know when the person on stage is having a good time.
Right. And it's just like a big neon sign, right? And like you said, directors, audition panels, people, your audience, your listeners, they're just like drawn to that. Like they're like, I have to be where that is. I'm going to that.
Even if you're not what they're looking for. And I think that's so important. Like you can have the best audition of your life, and if you're not what they need, you're not going to get the job. And it's sort of, that's all we can do is just present ourselves in the best possible way. Like, this is who I am and this is what I do. And if you want to buy what I'm peddling, here it is.
Yeah.
And like that, I mean, I know that's been feedback I've gotten at auditions. Like, we love her. It's just, she's not right for how we envision X, Y, and Z. Can't wait to hear her again for whatever, or I'll get a call a year later or 6 months later and be like, for something that is perfect.
Right. Well, and I think that's what it is when you're like remarkable or undeniable, because you brought the thing that is you the most, and then they remember you, or a listener remembers you, a panelist remembers you, and they're like, even, you know, maybe we pick something for that next time around, which I always say, like, take that if you're going to audition, it doesn't, and you know that maybe you're not totally the right fit, and you can make space for it in your life, given whatever your resources are at the time, financial, like that kind of thing. If you can make space for it in your life, go ahead and do that, but make sure that you're bringing exactly like your thing to it, because I want them to remember you and be like, oh, if I'm booking for something else, I need to find out where that person is. Like, no, call her, call him, right? Call them, right? Like, just make sure that like you're going to bring the thing that you want them to remember you for. Yeah,
exactly. And not something artificial. And I think so. It's like you go in there being like, I'm trying to fit into this mold. I'm auditioning for like X role, and so I'm going to be this thing. Even if you like make the sounds really well, if your heart's not in it, if it's not who you are, they may not realize what's wrong, but it won't be right.
Some of the most employed singers that we know are just themselves.
Yeah.
That's
the other night.
Yeah, actually. I mean, like, you know, if you want a Kevin Burdett, you get a Kevin Burdett.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you want a Patrick Arfizzi, you hire Patrick Arfizzi. You know, it's sort of thing that I would say one of the as a advice sort of thing is singers need to sing as much rep as they can to figure it out. Because I think, and as I think you mentioned that as well, that you'll find that slot that feels good. Like, I came through my undergraduate program as the larger voice in my school, and so I was always given the Puccini and the things that were probably a bit too big for me, or my teacher at the time was living a little vicariously through me, giving me some bigger roles, which my ego lapped it up. It was great.
Of course, right? I mean, don't we all?
But it wasn't until after I got out of undergraduate and started singing in some of the young artist programs that I had an opportunity to actually wrap my teeth around a little bit of Mozart for me. And I was like, oh, crap. Where has this been my whole life?
Right.
And it started, I remember telling somebody it felt like an Armani suit made out of spandex. It just was good. It felt good. Right. I felt hot in it. It was awesome. It was the right thing. And I mean, I still put on the Puccini costume every once in a while. Yeah. But at the same time, it was that I really found my sort of, well, at least for me, where I like to operate from was in the heart of that Mozart stuff for me, and I made a nice living off of it. It was fun, and I didn't hurt myself. That's something that we've joked about on our walks, or when we talk about life, is, you know, where would I be? You know, would people be pushing me towards bigger rep because you know, I'll be 47 at the end of the year. You know, would people be suggesting, you know, you should do this or do that, and would I have the foresight not to, you know, or would it be the right time, or would it be something I'd want to stretch for? I don't know. You know, that's unknown. But it's I think that and that was, I guess, probably also why I enjoyed the new music as well, because there's no precedent for what is coming
jump
out.
Ball.
Right.
So you can make it yours. You can, there's no album to listen to compare it to. There's also no album for the audience to listen to.
Right.
So you make it your own. And it was a really nice way for me to find my own voice and the way I sing. Because next time you listen to, I would say young singer now, but sing an entire Bohème, for example, you can pretty sure tell which album,
which recording.
Yeah, right.
And especially because there's certain mistakes that are in every album, and you can definitely go, oh, well, that person listened to the 1978 recording of Franny and Pavarotti, whatever it was, and because I did it, I listened to those, and it took years of untraining with good coaches and good voice teachers to say, you're singing a wrong note there. Oh,
or it's like, that's not the rhythm. That's actually not the rhythm. That's
yeah.
like, oh,
yeah.
And also, that's not your voice, right? Like, just if you're bringing that, and then your teacher's like, that you're singing somebody else's voice here, right? Like, and like, what does your voice do with this, right? And what are you bringing to this? And that's just so important. And I think one of the things that I really love about you pointing that out is making sure that you've got the right squad around you, right?
Yeah.
And just knowing who your people are, and the fact that you can trust them with your instrument, that you can trust them with your questions, that you can say, is this me? So when you were saying, like, is this the thing that I want to stretch for right now, right? If you are working with a teacher or a coach that wants to live vicariously through that, do you know if that's the case or not, right? Do I know that they're on my side, they're working with my voice and not necessarily something else? Are we all on the same team?
We've used the phrase our personal board of directors.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah.
It's important to have more than one member of that squad, of that board of directors, because you can have that one person that you think is the best teacher or best coach in the world, and then you need those other advice givers, or the people that listen to you, that have a good ear, to say, you sure about that? Just to bring you back down, or to just help check you a little bit. And if they're happy, and you trust them, and then usually you're on the right track, because yes, we pay them, but we don't pay them to be our friends.
Right.
A lot of times they do become amazing friends.
Of course.
But the ones that are worth it are the ones that are honest with you, and aren't just taking your money to help a boat payment or something.
Well, and I love the board of directors exactly for that reason, because of the fact that board of directors suggests that they also have like an investment in the success and health of like of your life, right? Of your professional life. And that's just so important, that you're finding the people that are making that mutual investment. Like you're in it together.
Your management.
Absolutely. Should include
your
management. And your voice teacher, your coaches, and people you've worked with in certain companies, other singers.
Yeah.
Spouses.
Yeah. Like, that's what I was. That look. For the podcast listeners, I'm just going to be like, that's the moment where Sharin gave an amazingly devastating look. Well, can I ask you this? This is maybe a little bit of a, offshoot from that, which is on the blog and on the podcast, I talk about micro actions, and micro actions are just these little things where micro action is not write a grant, right? That's a huge thing, right? Micro action is, write the intro to the narrative or something like that, right? Something that I know that I can complete in a day that's just helping me get things done, right? And I'm so curious if you have a micro action to share. Actually, Sharin has done this for the Sybaritic Singer before, because I featured her in a 29 Days to Diva, a couple, last year, something like that. Time is a flat circle, but but this idea is, can you tell us about a micro action that is meaningful to your life, to your career? And that's the idea, is just, it might seem super small, but that's the whole point, is I do this consistently, and it's this little thing that just is meaningful to me.
So good. This, it's sort of an interesting thing because this is the first thing that comes to mind. And this may actually come out as strange, but I love listening to other people's performances. Especially now that we're all in COVID and we're all just like posting stuff online constantly. I love seeing what other people are doing, other people are working on it. In a way, it's like, you know, keeping in touch with my worthy rivals, like seeing what other people are up to, seeing how other people are doing things, like what can I learn from this? How can I incorporate some of what you're doing? But I am so inspired by what other people do, what other people are putting out there, what other people are sharing and creating. Because art is alive. And so like, you know, sitting around playing on Facebook, like, yes, and seeing like pictures of dogs and food and alcohol and whatever, but like people posting videos or like little snippets, like 1 minute snippets of something like a digital recital I did, or these songs I recorded, or, you know, and just hearing what other people are doing, seeing what other people are doing. And I'm just like, yeah, like that's amazing. Or I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Or I don't know that piece. What is this piece? Or, you know, it keeps me interested and activated, like, especially as we're all like, especially during COVID, when we're all home, we can't be inspired by live performance because there aren't any. We can't go to the symphony. We can't go to the opera. We can't, like, that's one of the things we loved about living in, we loved about living in Charlottesville, but we also loved about living when we lived in Wilmington, going to Philly, going to Baltimore, especially when we lived in New York. Like we went to stuff every week, and we went to.
We would even drive back up when we were in Wilmington, back up to the city, see a show to New York, and then back down in the same day.
Same thing with Baltimore, seeing our friends' shows, and like being constantly inspired by what's being created around us.
Makes me miss it. Just talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's like when I see people posting stuff online or on anything on social media, I love it. I love ingesting it. Yeah. So it's like these tiny things, and it also makes me feel like I'm connected to our community in a way when we're all separated. Is being able to taste what other people are creating.
On a very, very similar, actually, because we haven't talked about this at all, but a very similar track for me is seeing what companies are doing and seeing, but for me, you know, because I'm now on the other side of the desk, so to speak, everybody is scrambling. Like, no, this is unprecedented. You know, how do you raise money when you have no product? You know, how do you still stay connected with your donors when you can't meet in person? How do you know? So there are all of these. There's some really amazing ideas out there, and that's one of these sort of the micro things that I would say is finding something new every day. Like you were saying, like a worthy rival, somebody that's out there that's maybe a touch ahead of, like, why didn't I think of that? Or I could do that here and no one would know the difference because they don't live in Memphis or they don't live, you know, wherever. Right. And to bring an idea that someone else has used, repackage it for yourself. Yeah. You know, if acknowledgement is due, then give the acknowledgement. But if not, use it, change it for your own, make it your own, and play it forward, because you're going to inspire someone else to do the same thing.
Exactly. We're all kind of in relation to each other and being inspired by the creativity that everybody's bringing to their specific roles in our ecosystem. We're all connected. So taking an idea and then adapting it to something is its own form of creativity. You were inspired over here, and then you're like, oh, and all of the parameters that I work with help me shape it into this thing that it's going to be as I do it. So I love those, and just love that the idea is every day I'm going to be aware of what's going on around me in my larger artistic community, because it does so much for me. It inspires me. It makes me think of things differently, but also, like Sharin said, it's connecting you to your community, right? So you're keeping those bonds strong, because you being aware of what people are doing is part of that, right? Is saying like, oh, I saw that you did that thing with the drive-in, blah, 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 you know, and then you're like, that is so rad. And then it creates that bond for you between other, I just think those are such a beautiful microcosm of what you can do every single day to continue doing those larger ideas that we want, building communities, staying aware, being inspired, being creative, right? When you talk about it that level, right, we kind of go like, okay, yeah, but how? And I think that's what micro actions are kind of designed to do, which is like, oh, the micro action is I watch something every day, or I go look at this, I stay aware of what other companies are doing every week, right? Something like that, because it leads to those larger ideas. So thank you both so much for sharing that. I think those are just such important concepts for us. So that brings me to a question, because of that curiosity, that I deeply believe in the power of curiosity, as I'm sure you can tell so far, like that I just really enjoy the idea of asking and answering and sharing knowledge. And that as we kind of end the masterclass in Studio Class, we kind of talk about two things. We have the, what do you wish that people would ask you? And then what are you deeply curious about at the moment? So you can choose to answer that in whatever order. It's what am I deeply curious about? And what do I wish people would ask me? So have at that as you will.
Ooh.
I don't know.
Age before pregnancy.
Oh, nice try. I mean, I would think maybe something is that, I do wish that people would have the opportunity to ask me or would ask about, what was life like on the road? What is life being a two-singer family, because, and that is something that I've thought that not going into education and not having a small studio or something like that is part of a knowledge that I'm not giving away, that I'm not transferring. So that's something I would say that would be one could ask me that, as I don't want them to ask me to. I mean, that sounds like, ask me about my life.
That's the point of this. It's a podcast. I'm interviewing you.
The entire point.
Fine. I have a real problem bringing the guitar to the podcast. What was the other one?
What
are you deeply curious about at the moment?
I'm going to answer yours first before I go back.
Okay. So something I wish people, and I volunteer this all the time, is everybody's career looks really different.
Yeah.
And it's all okay.
Yeah.
And so it's something I wish people would ask me about, is I have a parallel career. I used to call it a side hustle. One might call it a day job. I have another job that I do on top of, with my singing, that I love. And a lot of people teach, have very full studios, but still sing, or they work at universities. And I think the vast majority of us have other streams of income. And for a long time, I don't want to say I was ashamed of it. That's not the right word, but it wasn't something I always talked about, because it
wasn't like public knowledge necessarily.
It wasn't always public knowledge, because I think we all sort of like have side hustles that we do, like especially between gigs, like it's just bills to pay. But I love what I do as well.
What is your
So I work for a company, and I work for a man named Simon Sinek. So he's an author and a thought leader, a speaker. I started answering his fan mail.
I love that.
Yes, because one of my best friends also works for the company. And we're an entirely remote team. So in 2017, they were expanding the company and needed more people and make your own hours. And I was like, I'm 100% on board. We had just moved to Wilmington. When we lived in New York, I always worked for my parents had their own company. Yeah. So in between gigs, it was easy. I just like went back to the family business. Super, super simple. Then we moved, and I was like, oh God. And so this fell in my lap, and it was awesome. And I loved it. I loved the company. I loved everything we were working on, everything we stand for. We do a lot of leadership. We sort of train the leaders of tomorrow and believe that anybody can be a leader. And it talks a lot about purpose and living a life with fulfillment and purpose. And it's something that I have brought to my own music making. I share it whenever I go anywhere. I talk about a lot of the stuff we teach. But about a year and a half ago, I came on full time. We still make our own hours because we're all remote.
Yeah.
Which gets tricky when you're on the road doing a full-time gig, but they know that's what I do. And they are all very supportive of it. And I consider it no different than like having a university teaching job.
Exactly.
Yeah. People do.
Yeah.
You know, definitely. And there are so few people that have a life like Joyce DiDonato.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I think many of us go into this being like, I'm going to have a life like, you know, Sandra Radvanovsky. And like, well, I hope yes.
Good luck with that.
Yes,
good luck.
I would love that. Yeah.
Yes. Like 98% of us don't.
Right.
And it doesn't make you any less of a artist. Doesn't make you any less of a singer.
Right.
A lot of people, it keeps them sane. It keeps them a better singer.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know,
and so many of us that are experiencing particularly this pandemic, that was one of the things that when I transitioned from my teaching jobs into the marketing and communications clients that I work for currently, I was like, oh, I would not be living, like I would not be making any sort of income right now if I was still doing it this way that I was doing before. This is the only thing and so diversified income is definitely a big talking point on on this side of things. Cause I realized years ago when looking at, you know, the conservatory that I had gone to and I realized they brought on this like big name onto the staff. And I was like, they're not only joining this because they have like a burning love to teach. I was like, these are people that are consistently working at XYZ houses that you're just like, oh, hold on. That's going to give me a clue as to what it's like living in this life. Right. I don't have to feel bad about having lots of skills that I get paid for.
Right.
And I'm going to go ahead and do that because I'm just going to work it out so that they're, like you said, with working with Simon Sinek, that's you've worked it out in your life so that you can do the thing that you love with singing. And you also have a job that you like, that you love in another area of your life with different skills. And you're like, yeah, this is how we make it happen.
Right. So, and it's so creative.
Exactly.
But I do, like, I write, I do a lot of writing. I work. And so, and I now I work with like in their live events team. So, but I connect with our clients all the time, but it's no different. Like me being on the phone with a client for 45 minutes, talking about what's going on in their lives. It's the same kind of connection I get from being with an audience.
Or with me with a donor.
Yeah.
Right. And you're bringing all these skills that you bring as a musician or that you came up with, you've gathered them over this course of time to make you this like, just, I think it's our superpowers as musicians, honestly. Like,
one of the things I think it's kind of neat to see too, and it's a great lesson to learn as a younger singer, is if you've seen all the turmoil and the changes of positions and administration of opera companies right now, you never burn a bridge.
Yes.
Because
burn a bridge, yeah.
think about all of the singers that are now taking over companies. Think about it's less that they're business owners running opera companies. You know, it's more people that have had a career, people that are being affected by COVID or by the previous recession in 2008, 2009 that transitioned out and started, running companies. And, it's something that we have
worked their way up.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have a very, very small little opera family out there, little music family, and everybody knows everybody. And, we love, especially when, I think it was a little bit more after I had exited the career and, we weren't so competitive looking at, like we're going to climb that ladder, but as we've always been, at least we have, celebrating our friends' successes.
Yeah.
And as a tenor, it's different because there's, very few tenors. So
8 of them.
I know. So it's like, you can go, man.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't do it. It's a little different for sopranos and sopranos. So.
Right. You're like, it takes me a little bit of time to come to that place, but yes, exactly. It's there.
But it's important too, because we do have a small family, and I've seen over the years the sort of the shrinking middle class has been represented also in the arts.
Yes.
We have the haves and we have the have-nots, and it's nothing, they work hard to have the have.
Yeah.
But there used to be a very large group of performers that could make a very good living regionally, very good living, you know, and I was among that sort of group of people, and it was wonderful while it lasted, but 2008 really hit things hard, and everything shifted, and it's still shifting, and the COVID has made it even worse.
Yep.
You're going to have, you talk about what are you curious about, you know, like what that's something that I'm very curious about, that I'm really want to know what the future holds. That's something I'm focused on, and how what our landscape is going to look like in all the arts. But I mean, we're hungry for it. So things are getting created that are going to be really cool and are already cool. But they're like, when we actually get a chance to sit next to people and feel that common energy of being in a building together, or at a performance together, and have that feedback coming back and forth from the stage to the audience, what's that landscape going to look like? Who's going to be left? Who's going to decide to get back into the fray? Who can? Who, like, you know, I transitioned out and I was like, why the heck didn't I do this sooner? I love it. I love not singing. I love choosing when I want to sing.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm lucky I can do that. I'm very fortunate in that sense. But it was one of the best choices for me. But I'm very curious where who's gonna be the outliers? Who's gonna be strong to have some of those first jobs coming back? And are we all going to celebrate them? You know, are we all going to be celebrating our own existence as we kind of rise through this COVID stuff? And you know, we're all hungry for it. It's
truly,
it's needed.
Yeah.
It's part of our fabric.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, I wanted to ask you about this because you brought this up about kind of your relationship together, two singers in the same house, which God bless you. And like that, and I was curious because of that idea of this comes up time and again about kind of competitiveness in relationships, and this idea of when you were coming together as a couple, was that something that you talked about early on? We're always, you know, in support of each other. We're on the same team. Have you had that experience where together you're both cheering for other people or you're cheering for yourselves? I would love for you to kind of tell me a little bit more about that, whatever you want to share without being, you know, too prying.
Yeah. So we have an 8-year age difference, which has made it infinitely easier.
Yeah, I believe that.
So we're arguably
go for it.
Different generations of singers.
That's fine.
I was in the young artist program when we met.
Yeah, right.
He came in doing a turn of the screw, the least romantic opera in the entire canon.
So sexy.
He came in to sing the pedophilic ghost, and I was covering the governess.
And you were just like, oh goodness, like swoon.
But so there.
Let me pop
go. In. Yeah.
My career had already been established by the time we met, so there was no, oh, he's getting the job and I'm not, or she's getting the job and I'm not. I will say, one of the harder things for a while was Ryan's wife.
Yes.
You know, that, you know, because I was the one that was known, if you will, that, you know, that had sang at New York City Opera, had sung, you know, somewhere else. And especially coming back to some of those companies as well.
Right.
If she may have had the role, you know, it's just like, it's in that weird way of like having an older sibling going to the same school. That I was the first one recognized and she was the other, you know, but part of
that feeling of like being like you work so hard to like establish your own space in the artistic world and your identity. And then and in that course of time, and then you're like, oh, now I'm like only seen as connected to this person, or that kind of like in relation to something. I totally understand that. Yeah.
So the thing that was fun for me was when she started working at companies that I had never worked with, and I could just kind of fade back into the shadows and not be, you know, I could be Sharon's boyfriend or Sharon's husband.
Yeah.
and like, oh yeah, he sings a little bit, you know. It's like, and
It's been so fun down in Charlottesville.
Right.
well, because they only know her.
They only know me because he's never actually sung down here. So
Right.
we moved to Delaware. We both sung together there, so everybody knew him as a singer.
Yeah.
And I would sing at the Christmas party or whatever.
Yeah.
But he sang the other day here, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Sharin, listen, he sings." And I was
Isn't
like,
that
"No,
nice?
he's a legit singer. He
was
sung all
fun.
over the world. Like, hold on your hat."
Oh my goodness.
That was I have to admit that was really fun.
Yeah.
To have some of these people that were like, oh, he sings, and then to what I think give a nice performance and really move some people in ways that they have not been able to experience live music in the past 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to do that for a few people live in an outdoor event, and they loved it, and so that was, I would say, that's one of the things that was kind of, I could see how it would be harder of the same generation coming through or coming straight out of a conservatory together would be very difficult. And I think a lot of times you'll see one career may eclipse the other.
Right. Which happens often, I think.
Yeah. And you just have, I think that a couple would have to have and we've had these conversations, but a real conversation of what level do you want me to come to this party with you?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Is this your party or my party? Or, are these our friends? Is this am I love playing husband. I will I will carry the coat and carry the purse and just say, I'll be over there. And, she can do her schmoozing and do, whatever she needs to do at the moment. And if I get pulled in, great. But, I think part of it is letting your partner shine when it's their turn and when needed, or to build them up when needed as well. And also be there for them to fall back on you or to lean on you when needed, when you get a crappy review or you get sick in a performance or whatever, that being there and having a partner that understands the business. I feel that way with you. Yeah. She understood my need to transition out of it. Because of what we've been through, the emotional toll that it takes on our relationship, on personal, your relationship with yourself, and your family members and stuff like that. So some people might not get that if we didn't have a spouse that was in the arts. Right.
Yeah, and I think it's something that I try to be really honest about, because like we met, I was just leaving a YAP. The economy was still a disaster. Yeah. And just like trying to get management, trying to transverse that divide of from like YAP life into starting roles as a professional. Yeah. And I know, and I try to be as honest with everybody about this as possible, is that companies knowing me as his girlfriend worked in my favor very early in my career. It may not have gotten me a job, right, but it may have at least separated me from the 6,000 other girls that sang the same repertoire I did.
Like a social clout sort of thing.
Or just a name recognition. Sometimes it's just as simple as like, oh yeah, you're right. Yes. Only as simple as that, but it's like I still earned all the work I got.
Yeah. Exactly.
But
people don't like me that much, so
no. Oh my goodness.
But I mean, it's something as simple as that, and it's like we didn't actually start getting hired together until we were engaged. Yeah. Which was like 4 years into our relationship. Yeah. But I know, like.
That's a whole nother story, by the way. Yeah.
We'll do a round 2 of this.
It's one thing
we have very different work ethics and work situations.
And imagine not only that, but living in a hotel room together for a month.
Oh my God.
That's a much different experience than it is living in a small apartment in New York City.
Right.
Yes.
With one car. It's like there's many things that are compounded in those situations. You get to learn a lot about each other.
Yes, absolutely.
Lots of communication. Right.
But there's so much good that comes from a singer, like being in a relationship with a singer. Like if one of us is ill on a gig, if no one comes to visit, there's a level of understanding of like, I'm not going to talk today.
Yeah.
And Or it's like, I'm going to go, or be like, I'm going to CVS and I'm going to get you
all the things you lay in bed.
Mucinex and Zyrtec and a neti pot, and you're going to lay in bed and steam and not, you know what I mean?
I'm going to make the phone calls for you, like, you know.
And you don't have to explain it. You know, which
a great example, we were in, I won't say what city, but we were in a city and there was a really bad mold problem in the hotel room, and very bad.
Yeah.
And enough where I was coughing and I was wheezing and had a performance we were doing the show together. And I was just in hysterics because I didn't know, was I going to have to cancel? Was it going to be okay? I didn't know what was happening. She picked up the phone, made a call. We got a new hotel room. You know, my confidant, my
I was
best
like,
friend, so like took care of me.
I was like, you do what you need to do. I'm going to take care of this whole situation. I mean, in being honest, early in my career, it took a lot of effort from my ego to not maybe be resentful of his career, because literally like work would fall out of the sky.
Right. Well, and it's seemingly so, right? Just in a different place. You're like, that's what that looks like at that point of your career.
Exactly.
Right.
And also, you know, we're different voice parts, we're different, you know, all of this stuff. And you're like, we're going to have these very different experiences. Yeah. But I think that's it's asking you had to ask yourself those questions, Sharon. You bumped into it no matter what, just by being in your partnership, by saying like, how do I feel about this? I'm sure I have feelings. Like I gotta be responsible to this.
Yeah. And like, do I want to deal with this on a daily basis?
Right.
Like,
right.
The life I'm signing up for. And it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's like, you get in a relationship with like a lawyer or like a muggle of any sort. It's not something you have to really worry about.
Right.
But like literally,
you have other things to worry about.
You have other things to worry about.
Right.
Explanations. Why are you spending so much money on lessons?
Yeah.
Haven't you learned by now?
Don't you know how to sing by now?
Don't you know how to sing by now?
Not at all, actually. Yeah. It's like, you know, back in the day when we would do like 20 auditions in an audition season. Yeah. And like, if I got one job, I'd be like, I have triumphed. And he would have done
two auditions and got 4 jobs.
And
right.
half of the work. And I'm like,
and you're like, it's fine. It's fine. It's
exactly.
great.
We did have conversations about that though.
Yeah.
You know, they were very frank, and you know,
like, this is
I reacted this way because of this.
Right.
Yep.
Having this complete open conversation about that, and just being as like really honest as humanly possible. There was one point I remember we got an inquiry about doing a gig together that he thought he could do. And then when it started getting down to it, turns out he couldn't do it. And I just remember I was so mad because I was like, I'm going to lose this gig now because you can't do it. Right. And I realized it was my own insecurity that the only reason that I was being hired was because of him. Which was not the case.
Right.
Because they were like, oh, great, we'll just get another tenor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, oh, this has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
I'm completely projecting all of my insecurities and like whatever crazy nonsense is going on in my own brain is being projected onto you. My own
just a moment in your life that you came up towards, and you said, you know, that you probably didn't recognize that you were having that feeling at the moment, that you're like, oh, I'm only getting this gig because of our relationship or something along those lines. We all have whatever it is, fill in limiting belief of whatever at the moment, and go, okay, I didn't realize that I was feeling this way until I'm like angry about the fact that I'm going to lose this gig. And then you're like, well, why, you know, whatever. And then you have to answer that for yourself and go, oh, is this true? Is this accurate? What am I making up about this? What am I projecting in this situation? You know, and I think that's a beautiful thing that you both have navigated together is, and even now as you're making different life choices, as you're expanding your family and you're saying like, you know, who are we now? What kind of artists are we now? And like, how are we together? And I think that just comes down to, you know, being in relationship with each other and saying, I think that being musicians in relationship with each other, it presents different conversations, right? We're always going through all of these things, but I love how you've navigated that together, how open you are about that and sharing that, you know, just with, as people are saying, like, I'm thinking about this, is this even possible? Like that